All right, everyone, this mistake is killing your confidence everywhere. You are moving your hands way too fast. Let's start with the throttle. This is how your throttle input should be at all times. So as you're going on the gas, you're going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% throttle. And then as you roll off the throttle, it's just as slowly going the opposite direction. 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 40, 35, 30, 20, 19, 60, 40, 30. A lot of people ride around and they skip a lot of numbers. So they go 0, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, and they kind of go and they chop it off. And they go back on, they chop it off. So they're riding around like a heartbeat instead of like a nice smooth hill. Whenever you move your hands fast like that with the throttle, when you roll on the throttle quickly, the bike's suspension extends, it pops up. If you chop it, the whole suspension drops down. So when you are doing this, the bike is literally bouncing up and down. And that's definitely not too stable, especially if you're in the middle of the turn. That's the worst time to do it. So your challenge is, no matter what you're doing with the throttle at all times, rolling on the throttle, rolling off the throttle, on the throttle, off, on, off. Everything you do should be nice and smooth like a hill. No sharp edges whatsoever. That is your challenge to do. Now you may feel like you are already riding like this, but out of the almost 300 one-on-one cornering sessions I've done so far, most people are riding around like the heartbeat. Even if they're coming to a red light, it's a green light coming up and the light just turns yellow. A lot of people, I would say most people, once it turns yellow, they're at 10% throttle, they go straight to 0%. Every time you come to a stop sign, a stoplight, you slow down a little bit. Everything you do with the throttle, you have an opportunity to practice rolling off the throttle very slowly to 0% until you finally get back all the way off. But if you just chop it, you're just building that habit. So how many times do you use the throttle whenever you're riding? All the time. You're using it constantly. So even if you're adjusting your speed 5 miles per hour faster, 5 miles per hour slower, next time you're riding down the highway, just practice doing that. Whatever speed you're going, roll on the throttle 1 miles per hour faster and see if you could hold the speed at 1 mile per hour faster. Then go 2 miles per hour faster, hold it that for 10 seconds. Then 5 miles per hour, then roll it off to 2. Like, give yourself a challenge. I'm going 70. Let's see how slowly I could go up to 71 and see if I could hold it there and be perfectly steady. Now 72. Hold it there for 5 minutes. Let's see if I can hold that 73. Let's see if I can go 72. But if you're going 72 to 69, you're going too quickly. You see what I'm saying? Slowly roll on and off. Everything you do with the throttle should be slowly on and off. Now this doesn't mean you have to physically ride slowly just because your hands are moving slow. Keep in mind, the very, very fast riders, they have slow hands. They're not doing anything grabby or snatchy or grab or twisty, anything. Nothing like that, right? So even if you're rolling on the throttle quickly, here's 0% throttle. As you start to roll on the throttle, you could roll on the throttle pretty aggressively, but it's all in a linear fashion. It's not this. That's a big difference, right? This is your goal. And then when you roll off the throttle, you're not just going, and then you don't just chop it. Like this is, say, 70% throttle, all the way straight to 0. We forgot a lot of numbers. Do every number. Roll off the throttle. And the whole goal is to not have the suspension bouncing around, because if you're riding around like this with the throttle, that suspension is going up and down, up and down, up and down. Non-confidence inspiring. Next, with the brakes, it's the same idea. So whenever you go on the brakes, you want to squeeze the brake, however much brake pressure you need, and then unsqueeze the brake. You don't want to grab it, and you don't want to just let go of it either. So as you get on the brakes, the front suspension collapses, right? And then if you just, everything goes to the front tire, which is all good, but if you just let go, everything rebounds quickly, fast. So you slowly release the brake pressure to slowly allow the front of the bike to come back up without just letting it go and being very bouncy. You see what I'm saying? Front brake, rear brake, it doesn't matter. You're not stomping with your foot and then just letting go with your foot either. Everything is like this. On the brakes and then back off the brakes. And you could also practice doing that. You could practice doing everything. Even if you're just going on a straight line, going to the store, or going to work, or going to school. Say with the throttle, you start with the throttle, you go on the throttle, 1 mile per hour at a time, nice and slowly. Light just turned yellow. You're gonna roll off the throttle, reach up, and then squeeze on the brakes. And here's what you do with the brakes. Here's your new practice, your new challenge. Every time you come to a stop, you're on the brakes, you're on the brakes, you're on the brakes. The last foot of the stop, just like they say in champ school, the last foot, you're gonna slowly ease off that brake pressure a tiny bit to slowly allow the front end of the bike to come up very slowly before you come to a stop. It's just like in a car. You're coming to a stop and you got a bunch of people holding drinks. Like say they all have water. You know, holding drinks, right? Like a chauffeur stops. You come to a stop, you don't just stop it at 10% and the whole car rocks. That last little foot, you ease off brake pressure a little bit so you don't feel the whole car rocking. Same thing with the bike. So that is your next challenge to do with the brakes. Every time you come to a stop, slowly come to a stop, use the brakes, front brake only at first, then rear brake, and then do both brakes. Either way, no matter what brake, slowly on the brakes and really slowly back off the brakes. The whole idea is to have no suspension movement, or as little as possible. And finally with the clutch, whenever you're shifting gears, if someone else is watching you, try to make that person believe your bike is automatic. So that means whenever you're shifting gears, I watch people shift gears. Like we're taking off from a stoplight, I look at the front end of their bike. If they're taking off and the whole thing bounces every time they do a gear shift, they're moving their hands way too fast, right? So watch how people shift. It's a very good tell if they have slow, smooth hands or not. So when people say be smooth, they actually mean slow your damn hands down. You're moving your hands too quickly, causing the whole bike to bounce up and down. So my bike, my GS, has a quick shifter up and auto blip down, meaning from once you take off in first gear and you get on the gas, you don't have to use the clutch. You can just kick it up, it'll go to second, third, 0% throttle first, and then kick it back down. It'll auto rev match, auto blip the throttle, will do everything for you. However, I like to practice a whole lot not using the technology and just shifting normally. Get on the gas, you roll off the throttle, you pull on the clutch, you kick it up, you ease out the clutch slowly as you give a tiny bit of gas, no movement. So here's the easy way to think about it. When you put a passenger on the back, I want them to believe I never shifted. I want them to believe this is only a one-gear bike, like an automatic, right? If you're going like this on and off, that's why their helmet hits your helmet. And they're like, oh man, what the heck? It's not their fault, it's your fault. You're moving your hands too quickly, causing the bike to bounce up and down. So try to ride in a way to where the passenger, if you have one, never feels that you shift. Even as you downshift, upshifting, roll off the throttle, kick it up slowly with your hands, no movement whatsoever. You're going in fourth gear, you're coming up to a corner, say you're going down in third gear. Every opportunity is to practice, right? So you don't just chop the throttle, you roll off the throttle, maybe use a little bit of brake, slowly on the brakes, pulling the clutch, downshift, ease out the clutch slowly, off the brakes. Done with that, go into the corner. Everything is slow, smooth, there's nothing abrupt going on. And this is a very, very common mistake that people don't do, and then they write me questions about my confidence. Feels very weird with the bike, corner entry, you know, I'm downshifting, but I don't know why it's very jerky. I don't know if it's the tires or the suspension. It's probably not the bike at all. You're probably telling the bike exactly what to do. The bike will sit there for eternity without you jumping on top of it, right? So you're the one controlling the bike. So the inputs that you're giving to the bike, it's just telling you what the bike is doing based on what your hands are doing. But 99% of all your issues will go away with smoother, slower inputs. So in summary, everything you do with your hands, I want it to be nice and slowly on, and just as important, nice and slowly off. On the throttle, off the throttle. On the brakes, off the brakes. Pulling in the clutch, downshifting or upshifting, releasing the clutch. Everything you do is slowly on, slowly off. Most people are pretty good at kind of rolling on the brakes, on the throttle, pulling the clutch, that's all good. It's the release of everything that's way too quick. Chopping the throttle, letting go of the brakes, letting go of the clutch. And that's what makes all the jerky motion, right? So you can't have two sides of the coin, or you can't have only one side of a coin. The flip half is what people need to work on. The first half is everybody's pretty good, but the chopping and the releasing very quickly, that's where everybody needs to practice. So be the bell curve, be the slowly on, the slowly off, be the dimmer switch, and try to stay away from being the heartbeat. This is the problem.